Hey YouTube, I want to do a quick video on capacitors. See a lot of information out there about people trying to figure out if they have bad capacitors or not, and there's some good information and some bad information. We have some kind of random capacitors here from a monitor cap kit, and one of the kind of telltale signs of a monitor or any capacitor is bad is if it's a vent top where there's kind of that X crossover on the top. If it's bulged up like this one is, then it's bad. Also, when you remove them, you might find that the bottom, instead of the top bulging out, it has kind of pushed the bottom out too. So this cap actually vented out of its top and its bottom. But that doesn't mean that every cap if it has a bulging top, is bad, because this is a perfectly good filter cap, but some caps are actually built with that kind of dome top to them, and these are usually more common in big capacitors. Like this is a 400 volt cap. So even though this one is domed up, there's nothing wrong with this cap, and we can show that it measures perfectly fine. So just because the top is bulging doesn't guarantee it's bad, unless it was one of these vent top caps. Now if that top looks perfectly flat like it was brand new, that also doesn't guarantee that the capacitor is good. So this one we can test out as well as this one, but from an inspection standpoint they look just fine. So how do you tell if a capacitor is good or bad? Well, to truly test it you need an ESR meter. And this will measure the capacitance of the capacitor. It'll also measure the equivalent series resistance. So as capacitors age, especially the electrolytical type, that liquid inside of them that holds the charge will decrease, therefore their capacitance will decrease, but then they can also start to add resistance in the circuit that they are trying to power up with capacitance. So to figure out what these values should be, you need a little chart here where we have our microfarads on the left and then our voltages across the top, and then this kind of shows an acceptable amount of ESR. So this particular one, this was the one that had the bulged top. So this is a 220 at 50. If we plug it in here, this one was, remember, it was bad, it was vented. And it still isn't horrible. It has 172 microfarads and then ESR of 0. So on our chart we could go find that 220 at 50. So 220, and then we have to interpolate between these two. So, you know, the capacitance is a little low, but the ESR was actually fine. But I know that this cap was bad because it was making a lot of mess when you applied power to it. But if we go to this one, this is a 47 at 50. If we plug this one in, so our capacitance is a little low. It's about 30% low, and then it has an ESR at 12. So that was a 47 at 50, and we go to our table, 47, and again we'd have to interpolate between these two, but around 0.5 is what we should have. That's on a bad fold mark. So that should have half an ohm of resistance to it, but now it actually has 12. So not only is the capacitance low, but the ESR here could be impacting the circuit because it's acting as a capacitor and a resistor. And then this one's 1000 at 16. And again, these last few have looked just fine, even though that one tested bad. So this one's 1000 at 16, and on our chart, 1000 at 16, we should be looking for 1000 microfarads and 0.1 for resistance. So the ESR here is spot on, but remember that our cap was 1000, so this one is about 70 to 60% low. So again, we can't go just by looks to determine if a capacitor is good. This one looked just fine, and it had good ESR, but it has bad capacitance. And then the last one we did had, this was our 47 at 50, I don't remember already. 47 at 50 has a little bit low capacitance, but it has really high ESR. And then the other one just had low capacitance, but good ESR, even though it looked bad. So we have to make sure that we're not going just by looks. Now, in terms of people wholesaling caps, cap kits on monitors, I guess another thing when people say, oh, you have a capacitor that leaked. I'm going to grab this one, like, oh no, this one leaked. Oh no, this one leaked too. No, it didn't. A lot of times manufacturers dabbed on glue for these taller caps so that if the monitor was mounted sideways, making the chassis vertical, that the heavier capacitors that have the larger physical size to them, they didn't want them to stress the solder joint. So even though there's goop on the outside, that just might be glue from the manufacturing process. And these ones have it all over them. But that was never inside the cap and it never leaked out. Now kind of from this cap kit that I just did, again, these are different than these ones. This was a different monitor. This was from a K7000. And I've done hundreds of K7000s alone. And on top of that, I've done even more different monitors. And I've replaced thousands of caps. And I will say that I have replaced more good caps than bad caps. Because a lot of times after I do a cap kit like this, I go back to the ESR meter and see if they were actually bad or not, and if it matches up with the symptoms that I might have seen. So I went through, and this came off of a K7000 that was actually a virgin chassis. It is over 30 years old likely, and it has never had a cap kit done to it. So I was really curious to see how well these caps kept up. And of these three piles, this pile has over perfect capacitance, so higher than rated and absolutely no ESR. So these caps are still perfect 30 years later. This is a 2200 at 35. So this one has better than 2200 and no ESR. And then this pile was not perfect for capacitance and a little bit high ESR, but they would probably still be working. Might give a little issue, but not major issues. This was a 47 at 160, so the capacitance is a little low. Then off of our chart, the ESR should be about 1. So ESR is kind of high, but it probably won't prevent. That's the one that usually gives you a high voltage shutdown right off the bat. And then these caps were the ones that measured fine for ESR and capacitance, or close enough that probably won't be any issues. So this is a 22 at 160, so a little low on capacitance, but the ESR is right in the window. So again, we can't go just by looks, we can't go just by age. It all really depends, and in order to tell if a cap is good or bad, you actually have to measure it not just for capacitance, because a lot of us have multimeters that have capacitance. You also have to check that ESR. It needs to be doing both things properly to work in our circuits. So again, just wanted to kind of put my 2 cents into cap kits and replacing caps, because I've done thousands of caps, and this is all from experience, not just things you read on the internet. So hopefully this helps you out.